This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland went to the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs Media family. I'm your host, Justin Rohn. Support for this podcast is brought to you by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. Preseason is finally here. We are getting a sample of almost basketball. I couldn't be more excited. And joining me to discuss the Cavs' first two preseason games is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Thank you to everyone who's joining us. I hope you're second screening us while the guards square off with the Yankees. A runner, base is loaded in the third inning. A run already scored. What a fun start after the most anemic wild card series you've ever seen offensively for the guards. It's a fun time to be a sports fan in Cleveland right now.
I honestly feel like we are letting down some of our Cleveland fans right now because I've maybe watched like 7 innings of baseball in my entire life. And
your whole life? Really?
Yeah. I've played like a lot of softball, but baseball just hasn't done it for me. I've watched like the Winnipeg Goldeyes in person a couple times, gone out to a game there, but that doesn't count at all. But I turned on the 15th inning because I just saw everyone tweeting about it for hours. And I was like, okay, this looks like a little bit of history. I got some time before I'm going out. And within 5 minutes of me turning it on, the Guardians hit a home run and they won it. So I feel like I'm letting everybody down by not watching, but it sounds like they're doing well right now.
Good vibes. Good vibes for the boys, and yes, you are the reason they won. After all,
well, I'm glad you were able to kind of sift through that and realize that once again I'm making everything about me.
You always do, Justin. But you know it's been fun. To kick it back to the Cavs, we're 2 preseason games in. The first one was super duper fun. Second one, not so much. How you feeling? What are your takeaways, my friend?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good so far. I saw some stuff that was interesting through these first 2 games. I obviously noticed in game 2 that first quarter was not at full speed. I was the turkey was sitting heavy after Canadian Thanksgiving, and it looked like that was the case for some of these guys as well. I think Philly kind of going small ball was disruptive to them. Like you could tell that they were thinking a little more than they had in the first game. And I don't know if that was necessarily small ball. I don't know if it's because they were trying to implement some different things, but the fit felt a lot more natural in that first game. Although I did feel like the Cavs kind of found a little bit of a groove in the second and third quarters. They cut it to a 1-possession game near the end of both of those quarters. And, you know, that's an encouraging sign that you kind of work through things. But at the end of the day, I try to watch preseason without even looking at the score because really these guys are trying to work through some stuff, get a sweat, not get injured. It's not going to be at full speed, so it's hard to judge everything that's going on out there. But I definitely felt that there was a lot of interesting takeaways through those first 2 games.
Yeah, I think we should start with, obviously the marquee thing, at least to me, which is the Donovan Mitchell-Darius Garland pairing, because I came away really impressed with how ready both Mitchell and Garland seemed to be to pair up together, as well as how ready the coaching staff was. Steve Jones, friend of the pod, did a really great thread of just the kind of sets they were doing, the way they would kind of load up the strong side and then have a weak side action to get get either Garland or Mitchell the ball with an advantage. And it seems like JB was, I thought there would be more of an adjustment period for them to start really coming with good ideas from Jump Street, and that's not been the case.
No, it hasn't. And I think to some extent, they're probably able to do some of the stuff that they were hoping to do with Garland and Sexton last year, right? Like, obviously
That's
Mitchell
a good point.
Garland or Mitchell brings a little bit more to the table. But even when you're talking about like having him come off a pin down, it was probably something that they were anticipating doing with Ochai if he was on the team. You're able to do some of the Sexton sets. Like that's the real benefit of having Donovan Mitchell, is he can attack in so many different ways. I think the second game he didn't necessarily have the best touch, but I do like that in both of these games as they're trying to figure things out, you have Mitchell having more points than shots. That wasn't something that happened a ton even in Utah, right? Like I think in the first game you could tell the fit of Garland and Mitchell worked really well. Like I thought their chemistry was great. They were playing off of one another well. Both of them were kind of getting their opportunities both on and off ball. Second game, the shots aren't falling. And when the shots don't fall the same way they did in that first game, you start to think a little bit more, right? Like that's a natural thing to happen with basketball. And I think they were thinking a little bit too much in that first quarter, but I did think as the game progressed, they got a little bit more comfortable. And I think the thing that's really obvious to me and kind of jumped out is this is still kind of Garland is still at the wheel when it comes to this team. And I think the fact that they both seem to accept that and understand, hey, you're going to be the engine, you're going to be the guy driving this thing, and I'm going to learn how to play off of you. I think that makes it a lot easier versus if you think back to post-decision Miami in that first year, there was kind of a little bit more of a stand around and your turn, my turn, who's got the keys, who should really have the keys. Like all that stuff was weird and awkward. And I haven't felt that dynamic with these two. It's going to take some time for them to figure out how to play with each other and maximize each other's gifts. But I do think that it's been a more natural fit than I had even hoped.
Yeah. And any concerns I had about Donnie off ball, they gone. This guy looks really, really comfortable as a catch and shoot player. Right away. Mm-hmm. He is loading up for the shot as the ball is on the way to him, and that is something that really differentiates high volume shooters from low volume shooters. Is a closeout can really dissuade someone who isn't prepared to shoot the second the ball hits their hand. Mm-hmm. And there was a play in the second game. I early on, it was the first made three of the game for him, where the closeout was coming and it was on time and on target, but because he caught the ball with the intention of shooting right away and rose up, even though there was a closeout, it didn't affect his form and it didn't affect his release, and he drained it. And I think those are the kind of shots that the Cavs didn't have a lot of last year. I mean, Lowry was really the only one who was taking those. So Kevin as well, but none from the guard position because, frankly, Darius just didn't get as many spot-up attempts as the season wore on because there was no other creators on the court. So I think you really see that dynamic. I do think that statement here, but I do think they're going to look to play offense a lot more like how they played in game one than they did in game two, getting up 23s in the first half.
So do the good things instead of the not as good things.
Correct.
Okay.
I know it's some crazy stuff I'm asking out of JB. But I think that you look at the way that they were everyone was looking to get threes up. Dean Wade has fired on a very quick trigger as well, mm-hmm. From a catch and shoot perspective. So I think that you kind of saw the offense almost ahead of the defense, and that's not super surprising given that Mobley hasn't played yet. But to me, I think the offense has been really, really sharp whenever they lock in and play decisively.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting, too, because we saw last year as the season kind of progressed, we saw JB move Lowry to that weak side corner. And like whether it's Okoro or someone else there on the strong side, that seemed to be the best way when they were running the pick and roll. I really like the fact that now you can have either Mitchell or Garland running offense on one side of the court, and then you have the other one on the weak side, because if that ball swings to them, they're attacking. Now you have that same threat of a shooter that you had with Lauri Markkanen, although both are better shooters, but they also are now able to attack a destabilized defense. And I think you saw multiple opportunities where the ball swung to Mitchell or swung to Garland, and then they drive baseline and they create an opportunity for someone else. That dish to Okoro from Mitchell in that first game was so exciting, because that was the type of activity that we wanted to see from Isaac, right? Like recognizing that the opportunity to slash and that the defense isn't paying attention to you, make them pay for not looking at you, even if the 3-point shot is going to take some time, and I'm sure we'll get into Okoro a little bit later. Even if that's going to take some time, being active off ball instead of standing around and finding those passing lanes and making sure that the defense has to account for you is a major step up from where he was last year. And I just think the chemistry of Garland and Mitchell and what they're able to unlock for the entire roster is a really, really encouraging sign.
Yeah, I feel like the ceiling on this Cavs offense is just way higher. Which, I mean, a little bit but like you do want to see it happen. I think that the interplay between those two is really, really good on the offensive side of the ball. I didn't really leave either game worried that the balance of usage is going to be amiss. Like, none of those concerns are in my head right now. Now, I think the spacing stuff is an interesting thing to look at, because that first game, in part looked so good because Kevin Love was at the starting 4 and making it freaking rain early on. How do you feel about, the overall spacing, especially with LeVert at the 3 once Mobley's back?
Yeah, it's really hard to say, because even if Mobley hasn't necessarily added a 3-point shot or like a consistent high volume 3-point shot, if he is at the point where he's draining like that mid-range shot and he's more assertive on the offensive end, he's going to have real gravity to him, because you don't want to lay off too much, because then you're giving him a head of steam, right? Like that same dynamic is usually in play with Giannis, where you don't want to let the 7-footer with long arms come at you with steam and be able to kind of leverage their length to get by you or to get an easy shot. So I'm interested to see how the spacing looks. You could definitely tell in that second game that there were times where Mitchell wasn't used to kind of the lack of spacing, because for him, this is a step back, because Utah had so many 3-point shooters around him at all times. Whereas for everyone else on the Cavs, compared to what they were working with last year, it's a step up in terms of spacing. So I'm interested to see what it looks like with Mobley in the mix. I think Karras has looked really good. This is one of those things where, if my preconceived notion of what the starting lineup should be was Caris LeVert should start at the 3, the sample size that I've seen in these 2 games would have me all in on that. But I've kind of been an archetype over talent guy when we've discussed the starting lineup in the past, like kind of leading up to these preseason games, which is against my entire vibe and my entire essence. But I've been really impressed with the way that Caris LeVert has kind of bought into playing team basketball, the way that he's pushing the pace. I like the fact that if the rebound goes to him, or if he's the closest man to the ball, he can bring it up and allow Garland and Mitchell to play off ball and run the length of the court. Like, I like the concept of having 3 ball handlers out there, and whether it's starting or whether you use it at other points of the game, what I've seen from those 3 together is enough to make me say, I want to see this within the flow of the rotation on a nightly basis. Like, I think they're pretty dynamic as a trio together.
Well, I remember last year, or maybe I think it was actually the offseason, because we were talking about the backup point guard spot, and you kind of broke down Karas's playmaking numbers and kind of noted that compared to the available free agency field, Caris was, by some metrics, the best playmaker of the group. And I think we've seen some of that, where I felt that this way even in the play-in games, where I thought he was making some pretty good reads, even if the jumper was pretty hit and miss early on. I think he's made quite a few good passes early on in preseason. I still, I think just watching the games, because I have been on team start Okoro or start Wade, just because of just personal preference, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, watching the games, it is so easy to understand why, by Chris Fedor's reporting, it seems like Caris might be the favorite, because he's so clearly the best wing on the team right now. Like in terms of just his actual, skill on the court. Now, like those skills might overlap enough to give Wade or Okoro a spot, or a chance to earn that spot just because of the way Donovan and Darius play. But like, you just look at like who are the best 5-6 basketball players on the team. I just don't see a world in which watching this team right now that Karras wouldn't be on that list of names.
And the second time we've mentioned him on this podcast, but Steve Jones Jr. mentioned that like he's kind of like me, where doesn't care as much about who starts or whatnot, but kind of thinks it's easier if Levert's coming in off the bench, but he likes that as the closing look. And we saw last year in, I guess it was only 8 games really, that we had a complete game of Garland, Rubio, and Sexton in the lineup. And they closed, I believe, twice with Garland, Rubio, and Sexton all out there together. And I think this kind of plays into it. It's obviously you got more size and length when you're doing that with Mitchell and Levert, but it allows you to kind of have that dynamic look where you have 3 ball handlers. You don't know necessarily who's going to create and who's going to play off ball. I do have some questions and concerns from what I've seen so far. I do like, and I think it was more prevalent in the first game, where I could tell Mitchell and Levert were both trying to really make an effort to play defense on ball and to be disruptive and to kind of show, hey, we're buying in on that end of the floor. The on-ball defense hasn't really been the biggest concern for Levert throughout his career. And the thing I noticed with both Mitchell and Levert is there are times where they do get lost off ball, where they do have the length, they have the lateral quickness, and you see that when they're guarding someone on ball, they have the lateral quickness to stay with somebody, but they're out of position and maybe the footwork's a little off so that when they close out, it's not going to be effective, and they do get blown by. Maybe you don't notice that as much with Evan Mobley on the inside, but to me, it does make me wonder, hey, if we're going to have a bit of an adjustment period at the start of the year and there's going to be a feeling out process, do we want to lean on our defense to kind of, raise our floor while we figure things out on the offensive end? So it's going to be interesting. I really hope we get some games with Evan Mobley in this preseason. I understand playing it safe. It's a sprained ankle. It's the most common thing. I think there's 45 across the NBA already in the preseason because this just happens. But I would like to see Mobley out there because there's some questions that I feel like we aren't going to be able to answer until we see that unit all together, all 5 of them.
I couldn't agree more. And it is an interesting question if you're JB or even if you're a fan that's interested in this, because, the Karras at the 3 lineup might be the higher ceiling lineup, but if you're the Cavs and you just won 44 games by saying, hey, we're actually a defensive team, that is our identity. And we're a top 5 defensive team. If you're JB, would you be okay with jumping up 7-8 spots on offense in the overall rankings, but dropping down to 8th or 9th on defense because you've made the choice to go with a Darius, Donnie, Karras perimeter rotation to start, and like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that, to be honest. And like, I think even though the effort is there on ball for Karras and Donovan right now, I do think it is just so hard to be an elite off-ball defender, and giving Mobley and Allen that extra bit of help. Like, part of me just wants them not to settle into an over-reliance on those two to clean up their mistakes. So I love the idea of Donovan being the second best, by a clear margin defensive option on the perimeter to start the season. And right now, I think he and Karras are probably equivalent level defenders. And by the way, that help side block he had in that second game was unbelievable. So you can really see him when he applies himself. He can be an event defender. But like, to both of them, I do think, hey, you're gonna have to focus. You're gonna also have to really. It's not just focus. It's also like, how are you gonna handle moments of duress? There have been quite a few in these first 2 games, defensive mix-ups where the team scrambled and got in rotation and no one got out to that wing 3-point shooter. Tyrese Maxey got quite a few of those looks. Tobias Harris got a few of those looks. I
did enjoy AC being like, there's something about when we play Maxey, we seem to let him open. I'm like, our guards need to step up a little bit defensively sometimes.
Yep.
It's not magic.
Yep. So I thought their defensive focus like if you were asking me to give letter grades for the first 2 preseason games, I think the offense I would give a B plus. I'd give the defense a C minus. I think obviously you have to grade on a slight curve because Evan's not there, but I don't think that their defensive focus in transition has been super good, nor their ability to kind of, once they get in rotation, to snuff out possessions like they did so well last year. But again, this is the early part of the season. I wouldn't expect double A's.
Not even the early part of the season.
Yeah, you're right. I wouldn't expect double A's right now. I think they're figuring things out, figuring out new roles, and like I would not hold it against them if they're thinking a little bit more on the offensive end, because they are all in very different roles than they were last year.
Yeah, and I think we are going to inevitably grade on a curve as well, right? Like, this team has shown that they can defend at a really high level, and Mitchell has said himself that one of his personal goals is not to bring down the team's defensive rating. So I think that's the standard you hold them to. The other factor is it's preseason. Nobody's going at 100% speed, and defense is so much effort. But I think Karras and Mitchell showed that they can go out there and they can be disruptive, right? Like, they're going to gamble every now and then, and that gambling is fine if you have that backline support. When it's Isaiah Mobley and Robin Lopez or Kevin Love or even Dean Wade, who, it looks like he's working back to regain some of that lateral quickness. I think he doesn't look as quick on the defensive end of the floor as he did last season, which is probably to be expected, coming off of that injury. And he rolled his ankle as well in game 2. Hopefully he'll be back soon. But it's just one of those things where rolled ankles happen. You miss a week, and hopefully he's back and ready for the Toronto game. But I do think that gambling is a lot easier when you have like Isaac Okoro at small forward and Mobley and Allen behind them, right? Like, it's easier to get away with that. But when you have 2 gamblers, you really got to have that backline support there. And I think I almost prefer the Okoro method of, I'm just going to play positionally sound defense and stay where I need to be, versus the constant gambling. So it's going to be a feeling out process, right? Like, I'll be interested to see, does the footwork defensively off ball improve throughout the course of a season when Mitchell continues to work with JB Bickerstaff and the rest of the coaching staff on improving his overall defensive impact on the court. That's going to be something that I'm going to be monitoring.
One thing that's also interesting, by the way, is, we're worried about kind of the defensive trade-off that comes with, Karras at the 3 versus Okoro at the 3, and kind of what needs to happen to make that work, aka Mobley and Allen have to clean everything up. The inverse is, if Mobley's offensive game is further along, because we haven't gotten to see him yet, if it's further along than expected, maybe it's easier to accommodate Dean Wade or Isaac Okoro in that small forward spot, because he's already got that spacing to provide. So there's a lot of variables here that's going to drive what are the actual best lineups for this team.
You read my mind. The next thing I was going to is, I really like Karras as that connector, bringing up the ball in the half court. I thought he made a lot of smart second passes without, stopping the ball. Like, I thought he did a really, really good job. But how valuable is Karras the connector if Evan Mobley's out there doing that stuff? He's talked about bringing the ball up the court. We know that he's that half court hub, right? That outlet that guys can get the ball to. If he's taking that step forward, and if he's trying to play a little bit more of a perimeter game, I completely agree with you, Carter. Like, that might change the calculus, and that's why I really hope that we do end up seeing Mobley play a little bit in the preseason, because a lot of this comes down to experimenting, right? Like, I think I always think back to last year in the preseason where we lost the first game by 40 to Chicago,
and the world was on fire.
Like 131 points, and looking back on that preseason, the first 3 games we started Garland, Sexton, Okoro as the perimeter, and JB switched things up and tried Lowry, and that ended up working because that was something they saw in practice. I'm interested to see, do we try something different with Evan Mobley out there, even though Karras has played so well, just to exhaust all options and look at every single possibility. And there's going to be experimenting that continues into the season. Like,
part of me wonders, Justin, if if JB, because normally you set your starters to start the season, you kind of commit to that for a while. I wonder if that's less likely, given that JB has had so little time. Let's say Mobley doesn't play this preseason. I hope he will, but let's say he doesn't. If you're JB, that conceptually would make you a little bit more willing to say, I'm going to, I'm gonna make a call here, but like I'm not married to it, and it doesn't mean that whoever ends up going to the bench is a failure. It just means I didn't have enough data to work with early.
It's very possible. I mean, I could see it changing up by matchups. You're right. Like if Mobley doesn't play, I think that almost makes it more possible. I've liked what I've seen out of Dean Wade. I haven't really seen a lot that like screams starter to me.
So let's talk.
Okoro, we
Wade.
can get into as well. But he's kind of fallen into a similar camp. Although I definitely feel like we need to go a little more in depth on him.
Yeah, I want to talk Wade first. Because I thought he actually was awesome in the first game.
Yeah, he was.
Took 5 threes in like 23 minutes, made 3 of them. Was a very quick trigger shooter, which is really, I think, very important from a gravity perspective. He laced them from the wing, which really helps space things out.
He shot movement threes, which I don't think he did at all last year.
Yeah, a couple movement threes, which felt good. I thought his game in the second game was a little odd. It was almost like I watched it actually wondering, like, I wonder if the coaching staff told him to freelance a little bit and look for a shot a little bit more. I mean, he took a dribble pull up 15-footer with like 17 seconds on the shot clock. Like that is not a prototypical Dean Wade shot. And I think it was a little bit of like, I'm not sure if it was him trying to kind of demonstrate, hey, I can stretch my game out enough to be in the starting group. Or if it was, maybe a bit of coaching, or maybe just, having some fun and seeing how his game has developed in the offseason and testing himself in a preseason setting. But I thought game 1, Dean Wade certainly looked good enough to start, at least on the offensive end. I think you're right that he does look a little slower on defense than he did last year in the swing of things.
Which is part of why I kind of want to bring him along a little slower. Like
sure.
Even having him as the backup small forward, I think he is appealing to me.
Yeah, but I think the jumper has looked really strong. I loved the willingness. Again, he's taken 8 threes in 46 minutes. So that's the kind of rate that you want to see from that spot. I think that can be a big differentiator between someone like him and Isaac. If you're looking at the two more defensive options, is because everyone's talking about how Wade is a better spacing option than Okoro. The percentages don't necessarily bear that out, but the volume might. So I think it's certainly interesting how Wade has looked. And even though I thought he had kind of a bad game in game 2, I think he was part of the reason that first quarter was so ugly. I thought game 1 was promising enough to at least be noteworthy, especially given how quick he was firing some of those threes.
Yeah, I don't think there's a real clear-cut option. I don't think there's a clear-cut choice to start at the 3. Like, if you're going purely on performance, it's Karis LeVert.
Agreed.
I think Okoro and Wade both bring different things to the table, and we're all going to bring our own personal biases to this. So, like,
can I tell you what really appeals to me about Isaac?
What's that?
He was part of a starting lineup on a team that won 44 games, which was a top 5 defensive team.
It's a really good point, Carter, but I ultimately feel we'll see what happens with these last 2 preseason games, but there's no clear-cut option. Unlike our choices when it comes to video streaming, the only option for us is Zoom, buddy. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Let's get into Okoro, Carter, because I I really liked his first game against Philadelphia. Both of the 3-pointers looked really flat to me. I know that's going to be the thing that most people focus on is that 3-point shot. The first one came, he kind of was breaking down a defender off the dribble, gave it up, relocated, kind of stepped back to the 3, and it was flat. The second one was kind of a movement drifting into the corner, but not a set shot, but not a true movement shot from the corner. But everything other than that, I thought he looked really good. I thought his handle looked improved. I think his footwork looks better. He missed the shot in game 2, but there was that transition opportunity where he did a spin move.
I thought that was a great take.
Absorbed the contact, almost finished. It rimmed out, but he landed on his feet. And if you're talking about his first 2 years, that spin move is putting him on his feet, and he's throwing up a wild shot trying to get it to the rim and maybe get a foul call. But I thought he looked a lot more assertive in that first game. And I really like the fact that he's attacking the offensive glass. He's got 8 rebounds in 35 preseason minutes. And a lot of that does come on the offensive end of the floor. And that is something he absolutely needs to do. Create those opportunities. He gets the offensive board. I think he got multiple and ones out of that situation in those games. I still don't feel like he's done enough in the preseason sample size we have to really build like a strong starting case in comparison to Karis LeVert. LeVert's been better, but I'm liking that we're seeing some growth in different areas for Isaac Okoro.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly a glass half full take.
It's preseason, baby. Every glass is 3/4 full, even if it's only got a few drops.
Yeah, I think that like, if you're a skeptic, you'll say he hasn't made a 3 yet. And his game, he's played one game where he was pretty okay offensively and another one where he's kind of bad. Again, not an event player, 0 steals and blocks in that first game. Not sure about the second one. But I kind of agree. I think he had looked, he was appropriately opportunistic in that first game as a cutter, and found himself trips to the line and made all of his free throws, and the stroke looked really good at the line for him, which I think is encouraging. So I don't know. I can't help but think he's just the kind of guy who, like, I just think the lineups he's playing in do not super serve his current skill set. You know, like he played kind of deep into the third quarter in the first game after all the starters were out. And he's playing with Neto and Wade and Lamar Stevens and I feel like when the offense was cooking and he got to play alongside Donovan and Darius, he looked a lot more comfortable on the court offensively. He didn't get a lot of wide open 3-point spot up opportunities, and we'll have to see. It's such a small sample that I think if you're already deciding that the 3-pointer is just still busted, then I don't know. I'm not there yet. But I do think like he is a guy who right now continues to benefit from playing around, better players. And also, frankly, we get to notice him on defense a little bit more because that's when you're playing in the starting unit, you tend to play against other star players that you can presumably then go lock down.
He gave Maxey fits in the second game. That was one thing I noticed. When he came in, everything became a lot harder for Maxey.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that it's a spot right now where he hasn't shown enough to win the starting job. I think he has shown some, but also I think this is why I kind of would love to see him get some more minutes with that group. And I also really want to see Evan Mobley play. I mean, I think we cannot overstate how hard it is to evaluate this small forward spot when the identity of the team, which is to me still Mobley and Allen anchoring the defense, isn't available to them.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. And for me, I thought the first game was a lot better than the second game. Like the second game, he played 19 minutes. Jetty played 17 and took 4 shots more than him. Isaiah Mobley took more shots than him. Like Lamar Stevens took more shots than him. Like I want to see him continue to be assertive, even if that assertiveness is more kind of, showcasing the handle and the drive. Because we talked about this in the past, Carter, what we want to see more of from Isaac Okoro if we could pick one between the shot and the dribble. And I think we both picked dribbling because he's got such a good basketball IQ and he's got such a good sense of the game where he can be that connecting guy. He can make the right pass. He's a really good finisher at the rim. And if that's what it's going to be for him this year, if the low volume 3-and-D spot up in the corner guy isn't what he's able to bring to the table, but he is able to bring that, I'm okay with him coming in off the bench and functionally playing as the backup shooting guard for this team, right? Like if what we saw in those games was we saw Point Mitchell in both of those games where there wasn't Raul Neto, Mitchell was playing the point. If the second unit is Mitchell, Okoro at shooting guard, Dean Wade, Kevin Love, and Evan Mobley, I think you got 3 good defenders there that allows Okoro to attack the basket with space around him. I think you can kind of facilitate that if that's the way that his growth is going, but he needs to remain more assertive. What he did in the second game offensively, I like the takes that he did. It just wasn't enough of them. And that can't be the case when you're competing for the starting job because we know what he can bring to the table on the defensive end of the court. We know he's a good transition player. We know he makes smart plays. But if he isn't maintaining that assertiveness at all times, we need to see that motor at work. And that's the biggest thing to me. I want to see more field goal attempts from him out of these remaining games.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like with Isaac, it's a story of volume.
Yep.
Like, we just need more of everything to really earn the spot because it's just a more competitive rotation this year. Mm-hmm. I do think he's a rotation player on this team. I think he even if Karras or Dean gets the start, he's either the backup 2 or the backup 3, and should have an opportunity for minutes. But like he is going to have to earn them, and he's going to have to find a way to to make a notable impact. Or these guys who just make more splash plays are going to get more more run than him.
Yep. Yeah, and JB Bickerstaff commented, it was a good piece by Kelsey Russo, I believe, talking about how they kind of pigeonholed Okoro at times last year, right? And they want to allow him to have that freedom to explore his game. And who knows, maybe that does mean what I was talking about before, about coming in off the bench and letting him get some ball handling reps alongside Mitchell, right? Like maybe that's the way this goes. And I think the floor of what Okoro brings to the table is a player that's going to be in the league for a long time, but currently that what his skill set is on the offensive end of the court kind of lends itself to being kind of like a 7th or 8th man, and he needs to show, hey, I can take that step forward. I can be more than what I am now. And we got to remember how young he is. Like people will compare him to Matisse Thybulle. He's still younger than Thybulle was in his rookie season.
That's crazy. That was a good stat you used in the Discord today. I was proud of you.
I'm always workshopping my takes in the Discord. You know how this works. But no, like that, I think there's room to grow for Isaac Okoro. And who knows, maybe that does mean coming in off the bench because we might not love Karis LeVert at the 3, but I think that'll work. Like I think that's it's a choice that makes sense, and it does bring a lot of things to the table. Or you could go Dean Wade at the starting 3 if that's what's best for Isaac Okoro's development, because as much as we're trying to win this year, we are still trying to develop everyone internally, and flipping Okoro for like just a 3-and-D wing like a Robert Covington out of the air, like that doesn't benefit anything, because we're not trying to win a championship this season. It's about maximizing all the talent that's on the roster, whether that means as part of the team moving forward or potentially elevating someone's status as a trade chip. So I'm curious to see how they use them.
It's funny that you frame it that way, because I think it kind of, in my head, the framing of not trying to win a championship this year, I think that kind of explains why I feel no Okoro angst. I feel like among our Discord listeners and the conversations in there, sometimes I feel like there's a lot of angst And I'm just like, well, he'll either be good enough to be really helpful this season, or he might take some more time, or whatever. But it's like, it just feels like a year for him to really find himself. And if he does, that's awesome. I think he'll earn a ton of minutes. If he doesn't, well, bummer. But we have some players who are, I think ready-made to help right now. So. Yeah. I think I feel very little Okoro angst, and I kind of hope the organization doesn't either, because I think that if Isaac's like, if I don't make every corner three, I'm never going to play. Like, that's not going to be good for his development either.
Yeah, and I think part of why you don't hear or talk about the 3-point shot when it comes to Okoro is, like, he shot 40% from three after December last year. I'm sure he's making his threes in practice. It's about getting it to translate to a game, right? Like that is the number one thing, is getting what you do in practice to like actually having that come to fruition on the court and doing it at a volume that matters. Because even if you went from 40% from three down to 37 at a higher volume, that's going to make a big difference. I'd take 35 at a higher volume if it came with the increased assertiveness, where he's getting those offensive rebounds and creating other opportunities. He's finishing at the rim. He's creating for others, right? Like, I think that there's more he can bring to the table. So I'm curious to see how that plays out, but I think some of the angst has to do with him being the 5th overall pick, right? Like, there's a different set of expectations that come with that. But the reality is, once you get drafted, it doesn't matter where you were picked. Like, your skill set is going to determine your role, and the team doesn't have to make different decisions because he's picked 5th versus someone that's undrafted, which I think the undrafted comp and someone that people are like, oh, well, he can bring the same things as Okoro, is Lamar Stevens. And I find it interesting, Carter. You pointed this out to me as well. And when Isaiah Mobley checked in the first quarter, you messaged me about that. And rewatching the game again today, I think the intention for that was to move Dean Wade over to the small forward position. But it is interesting that Lamar Stevens only seems to be getting in garbage time. And I wonder if that is just I wonder if that has to do with having so many guys that the first 2 games are to get a look at a certain group of guys, and we're going to see a different group in the second half of the preseason, or if that is a reflection that he isn't really in the rotation right now.
I think it's 100% a reflection that he's not in the rotation right now, because you look at game 1, Howell Neto was getting minutes in the second quarter, and game 2 he didn't, but it feels like Lamar has really only played once the switch has been flipped and the end of bench guys are getting in. And I think that I think there's some logic to the fact that Isaiah Mobley is more of a pure 4 than Lamar. So if you want to see Wade at the 3, it makes some sense there. And you know what? JB might play Lamar in the first quarter tomorrow and will look stupid. But right now, I think it was my expectation that Lamar wouldn't be in the rotation. But I was surprised that Isaiah was getting run ahead of him, just given what Lamar's meant to the team, Lamar's veteran status, and frankly, that Lamar right now is a better basketball player than Isaiah Mobley. So I think it's certainly surprising. What are your early thoughts on Isaiah in an NBA setting? Because I think my takeaway is he's going to need a lot of time in the G League this year.
Yeah, he's going to need a season in the G League. I did think in the first game he looked better than he did in Summer League. Like, you could tell with NBA spacing.
Yep, made a couple really nice passes.
His ability as a passer really comes through. I think the offensive game is going to take some time. I think it's going to take some time in the G League as well to figure out his best defensive position as well, because he can play both the 4 and the 5. I think he's more of a natural 4, just kind of looking at his size and mobility. But it definitely looks like he's going to need some time. And I agree with your assessment of Lamar as well. Like, I think we both expected him to not be in the regular season rotation, but I would have figured with Dylan Windler out even that you would see him more in the preseason rotation. But, it makes sense, because if everyone's fully healthy, the depth chart at the power forward position, I think, is going to be Evan Mobley, Kevin Love, and Dean Wade. And Dean Wade is probably going to be one of the backup threes as well, alongside Isaac Okoro and Jetty Osman, and maybe even Dylan Windler once he comes back from
Poor
his sprained
Dylan,
ankle.
man.
Yeah, poor guy. Right after we talked to Jamal, and we're so excited to see him in the preseason. He's one of the hundreds that has a rolled ankle in the preseason. Just the absolute worst injury. If there was a trainer that could find a way to prevent sprained ankles in basketball, that person would be the richest man alive.
You are not kidding. That almost felt like an ad read setup for some reason. I don't know why that. I don't know why that happened, but it did.
Do I got a trainer for you? It's me, baby. My ankles were always bleeding when I was playing basketball because I just tape them up, and they were always sprained, always swollen. It was is the absolute worst. No, I want to see Dylan. I want to see him get some opportunities, but it kind of makes sense. Like I know Lamar is going to be ready, and that's something that I don't think we should take for granted as fans. Like, it's really nice to have that as an option, but time's going to come. Injuries happen. Nobody plays 82 anymore. You're going to play it safe with injuries. You have depth for a reason, and I expect them to use it. So when his opportunity comes, I'm sure he's going to give them some minutes of hard basketball, because that's how he plays.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other players jump out to you that have been getting burned with the team? I thought Neto's minutes were really, really solid in that first game.
Neto's real fun. I was thinking of you when I was watching him play, because he's fun. Watching Raul Neto in that first game made me think, if this guy was just on our roster all of last season, we would have won 4 more games. With the injuries they had, losing Rondo, and just having a guy that plays hard on defense, makes the right play,
organizes the offense. Like, I think that if he were the only backup point guard on the roster and they hadn't signed Ricky and we weren't expecting Ricky to come back,
I would have been happy with that.
I think I would have been okay with that. I wouldn't have been like over the moon, but like, you look at the backup point guards in the league, it's not like there's a ton of dudes way better than Raul Neto out there. So I was pretty pleased with his minutes. I've also been pleased with Robin Lopez in limited action.
Carter, I got a name for you.
Oh?
Jared Allen. My God, it's so nice to see him back on a basketball court.
It is nice.
Jared was awesome in that second game. He had some weird missed finishes in the first game, but just seeing him out there, I think the refs swallowed their whistle a little bit because they didn't want a preseason game to go on forever, and Philly was just doing the Toronto strategy of contact on every play defensively. But it's so nice to see Jared out there. It's nice to see the chemistry. Like, he's got automatic chemistry with Mitchell. He's got chemistry with Garland. He's got chemistry with LeVert. Like, he just fills in all the gaps, and having not really seen him healthy with the Cavs since like March of last year, it's nice to see him back there on the basketball court.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think that he's looked really, really good offensively in the second game. Really was punishing the Sixers without Embiid out there. And yeah, it was definitely nice to see him. I feel really good about the center position. I think Robin looks good enough to help. That's a hell of a screen, man.
Yeah, it's so nerdy, but my God, he sets a hell of a screen.
Hell of a screen. Does the steal thing to help deep defending bigs to get his guys easy layups. Jared had a really good one of those too in the second game, and just seems like he's going to be a really fundamental helper on the team. And I left that game feeling pretty good that he's going to get run even when the team is fully healthy at the big position, because he's just having stability at the 5 is just so comfortable and so helpful for a team that is going to pride itself on defense. And I just cannot shake the suspicion that JB is going to keep going back to him. So looking at the end of rotation guys, Sharif Cooper had some really fun moments in that first game.
I hope he sticks around in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I think, you look at, they have that 15th roster spot. He feels like the kind of guy where, if a guy like RJ might get promoted up to the active roster, you have that extra two-way open. He does look talented when he's out there. And, that's really all you're looking for from your, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th people in a training camp roster. And I think he's certainly cleared that bar. Diakite looked really good as a rim runner in that first game. Not so good in the second game when they were clearly looking for some of those plays out of him. But, I think that, do you think any of these guys have a real shot to make the roster jumping out at you right now? I think Cooper would be the one that would jump out at me for the camp invites, just because, Ricky's still hurt and you might want, someone to fill some minutes in case Neto or Garland get banged up.
Yeah, I wouldn't even be surprised. Rather than promoting RJ, maybe you just give Sharif the 15th spot on a non-guaranteed deal and see kind of how he fits. Or I could see that situation be managed similar to Brandon Goodwin last year. I'm all for keeping Sharif around. I think it's so cool that he and Okoro are on the same team again, and he's talented. Like he's a really, really good passer. You can tell he's got an ability to go out there and score, and I can't help but think that there's something there. Like I know we both kind of liked him going into the draft. If the Cavs were able to get I think we thought he was going to be a late first, but he ended up going in the second round. I just kind of want to keep him around. I think Diakite also looked good. I liked him. I don't think anyone has looked good enough to get a guaranteed deal, but I do think that there's guys that have shown enough to land on a roster, whether it's the Cavs or somewhere else.
Couldn't agree more, man. It's been fun. I'm excited that it's been a weird preseason where the Cavs games were so spread out, but now we finally get some freaking games. It'll be fun. Hawks.
I think that was part of why it looked so sloppy. I know they comment on this too, that 5 days off was just weird. It's amazing that some teams are playing their fourth preseason game already. And I know the Sixers were playing their third against us, right? There's just, it's weird the way that it's been spread out, but at least, if Mobley's timeline is closer to the 1 week versus the two, only having that one game in the first week is a nice thing.
Yeah, for sure. And, I hope we get to see Mobley either tomorrow or Friday, one final dress rehearsal. And I know oftentimes that last preseason game is kind of the all bench game. So, I would love to see at least one game with, the projected starters playing together.
Tomorrow was in Cleveland too, right?
Tomorrow is in Cleveland against Atlanta.
Yeah, well, if you're going to have everyone out there, it'd be nice. But I'm pretty sure that the Mobley decision will be a little more health-based than...
It's not about vibes?
Yeah. I think it's...
Steve Spiro, man. He should just call us.
I thought you were going to go a little longer than that, and I just kind of awkwardly paused and sat there. No, I think it's going to be health versus vibes, but I would love to see kind of a full squad on Wednesday, and then you can toss Friday away. But number one thing I'm rooting for is no serious injuries. I saw the Marvin Bagley one today, and my heart is broken because I thought he had a good opportunity there in Detroit, and that looks serious. And I just absolutely hate it. So good vibes all around. Hope everyone stays healthy and can avoid major injuries. Do you have anything else you're looking forward to these next two games before we wrap this up, Carter?
No, I just want to see. I'm just excited that Cavs basketball is back. And, I think we're going to be heading to the land for the home opener.
Hell yeah, buddy.
Going to be fun. So if you're going to that game, come, hit us up. Try to say hi. It's getting real, man.
Yell at us randomly if you see us in public.
Oh, that's our favorite thing.
Berate us.
Unironically, our favorite thing is when we're accosted by strangers. So yeah, really excited, and it's getting real, man.
The jerseys look good too, don't they?
Yes, they do.
The jerseys
court
and the
looks
court
good.
look
Jerseys
really good.
look good. Everything, I think it has been a successful brand refresh for Daniel Arsham and the boys.
The vibes are immaculate, my friend. Big thanks to everyone that tuned in live on YouTube. If you want to support us, like, subscribe, click notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of the Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, you can send a screenshot of that review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.